There's nothing more exhilarating than pointing out the shortcomings of others, is there?
This video is made possible due to those who support me on Patreon. And I'd like to give a big shout out to patrons Conrad Truitt, Dan Ray, Duchess, Flake, Frame by Frame, Joseph Abrams, Kyle Kramer, Majin Wiebe, Mariah, Sophia Narwitz, and Stephen Dillon. Thank you all for your support. Hello everyone, and welcome to the second episode in my Media Misdiagnosis series. Each episode will discuss a single psychiatric disorder, examine how the disorder is portrayed in mainstream media, and analyze how accurately said disorder is depicted, dispelling common misconceptions. Before we begin, a disclaimer. I am not a medical professional, thus please do not use this video to diagnose yourself or others. Always consult a professional if you believe you may be struggling with a mental disorder. Today we will be discussing bipolar disorder. To begin, we first must define the two primary states those who have the condition shift between, mania and depression. Mania is defined as an extremely elevated or heightened mood. Someone who is in the midst of a manic episode may seem very happy, confident, energetic, and talkative. Now while that doesn't sound bad in and of itself, it's the severity of the state where potential danger lies. It's one thing to say, hey, I'm feeling pretty good, I might hit the roulette table and play a few spins. It's another to say, I am the greatest gambler in the world, put my entire life savings and a second mortgage on my house on black. Depending on the intensity, one may simply feel quite pleasant, enjoy the company of others, and be a social butterfly. This would denote a more moderate level of mania, known as hypomania, which usually only lasts a few days. However, if one's condition progresses to full-blown mania, it can lead to severe consequences, making rash, impulsive decisions with no grasp of the consequences, and, if severe enough, delusions or even psychosis. In addition, when in a manic state, one is prone to racing thoughts, and their mood taking a turn for the worse, becoming extremely irritable and aggressive, especially when exposed to negative stimuli or extreme stress. On the other end of the spectrum, we have depression, a condition plagued by so many misconceptions it could take up an entire video of its own. While some may think depression is simply just being sad, this is far too simplistic. Being sad following some sort of personal setback or unfortunate life event is normal and denotes healthy emotional regulation. Within reason, of course. Depression is more of a complete drainage of said regulation. It more accurately can be described as feeling empty or numb, where you don't really feel anything at all. Things you once enjoyed no longer do anything for you, you feel hopeless, worthless, and hardly have the energy to perform simple tasks, with severe depression often leading to suicidal thoughts. Bipolar disorder is a condition where someone will fluctuate between these two states, hence why the disorder was formerly known as manic depression. We all have our normal ups and downs, but bipolar disorder is characterized not only by the extremity of these states, but by the rate at which they fluctuate. And here we come to one of the biggest misconceptions about the disorder. While you have probably heard the term bipolar being used colloquially to denote someone who seems extremely emotionally erratic or changes their mind quite often, bipolar episodes, whether manic or depressive, can last for extended periods of time. While hypomania usually only lasts a few days, a full-blown manic or depressive episode can last weeks, months, and in some extreme cases, even years. To put in perspective, in order to be classified as someone who undergoes rapid cycling in regard to their bipolar disorder, one must only go through at least 4 episodes of mania or depression in the span of a year. The concept of someone undergoing lightning-fast mood changes every other minute is mostly a misconception, as this would denote someone who is in extreme turmoil, not representing the majority of those with the disorder, and would even be more commonly found in other disorders such as borderline personality disorder or schizophrenia. So we've gone over what bipolar disorder is. However, like with ADHD, it can present itself in different ways with varying symptomatologies. The most commonly diagnosed type of bipolar disorder is what is known as bipolar I, which is characterized as having more frequent and severe manic episodes and may or may not include depressive episodes. It is also the most common found in media. My own first exposure to the disorder was via the character of Craig Manning from the television show Degrassi: The Next Generation. Craig is first introduced in season 2 as the victim of physical abuse at the hands of his father, bipolar disorder being more common in those who have experienced severe trauma, especially in adolescence. While Craig isn't officially diagnosed until season 4, we see the symptoms of his disorder presenting themselves much earlier. After Craig's abusive father is killed in a car accident, the shock appears to trigger a manic episode, with Craig acting erratically, disconcertingly jovial, and eventually progressing into full-blown mania, including aggressive behavior and hallucinations. After Craig discovers he has gotten fellow student Manny pregnant, rather than panicking as you would think a kid his age would, he is elated, immediately picturing them raising a family together, seemingly not fully grasping the reality and weight of his situation. Craig's erratic behavior becomes more frequent and pronounced as the series progresses. He asks his girlfriend Ashley to marry him, causes a scene at her mother's wedding reception, and steals his stepfather's credit card to go on a spending spree. We also see the dysphoric effects of his manic state. After Ashley declines his marriage request, he lashes out, destroying a hotel room causing thousands of dollars of damage, and later assaults his stepfather when he tries to help him. Craig's condition eventually progresses into an extended manic episode, and he ends up on the street, a tragic reality for many who suffer from the disorder. Thankfully, he is able to get the assistance he needs, and via medication and group therapy, he is able to keep his condition under control. Another notable example of a character with bipolar I is Pat Solitano from Silver Linings Playbook, a former high school teacher with primarily manic symptomatology. Like Craig, Pat is said to have been struggling with bipolar disorder throughout his life, but it didn't become overly noticeable until later down the line. He is said to have been convinced his wife and a fellow teacher were embezzling money from the school, denoting delusional thinking in line with severe mania. And after he catches his wife cheating on him, he nearly beats the man to death. Following his stay at a mental health facility, Pat appears to be experiencing an extended manic state, erratic behavior, speaking without thinking. Despite his manic state driving him to be very productive and optimistic, it also results in him not having more grounded expectations, him believing he and his wife will get back together when realistically, that isn't going to happen. Like Craig, we also see Pat react aggressively when faced with extreme stress. Then there is Homeland's Carrie Matheson, a CIA agent pursuing a prisoner of war turned terrorist on US soil. Though her bipolar disorder makes her very motivated and proactive in pursuing her mission, her obsession with her pursuit results in full-blown manic episodes consisting of paranoia, aggression, and rash decisions and behavior. These three characters would all be classified as having bipolar I, since they are each shown to experience at least one full-blown manic episode, which itself is classified as one requiring either hospitalization or their mania resulting in severe negative consequences to their personal life, and or posing a danger to themselves or others. Their symptomatology seems to mostly consist of manic or hypomanic episodes, with limited or even zero depressive episodes. Men on average tend to display more manic symptoms in comparison to women. Now, while these depictions have received criticism, which I will touch on a bit later, they are more or less quite accurate portrayals of bipolar I. I wouldn't say media portrayals of bipolar disorder are by and large inaccurate, but rather limited, primarily due to more of the well-known portrayals not showcasing the depressive stage, which can often lead to people just thinking of bipolar as a stand-in term for being crazy or unstable, which is far from accurate, considering said behavior could be as a result of a number of other disorders. However, there are some media portrayals that give a less familiar view of the disorder. The third episode of Amazon's Modern Love stars Anne Hathaway as Lexi, a seemingly well-adjusted career woman. The episode begins by showcasing her blossoming romance with a man she meets at the grocery store and her successful career life. But Lexi's lively demeanor suddenly takes a turn for the worse as she falls into a major depressive state. Lexi would most accurately be described as suffering from bipolar II. Someone with bipolar II fluctuates between hypomania and major depressive states, and does not suffer from full-blown mania. Since Lexi is shown to experience a major depressive episode, this would classify her as bipolar II, which denotes someone who has not experienced a full-blown manic episode, but has experienced a major depressive episode. Even a single instance of full-blown mania would classify her as bipolar I. An infinitely polar bear, Cameron Stewart struggles to keep his bipolar disorder under control in order to salvage his relationship with his wife and children. Because he is shown to undergo at least one full-blown manic episode, which triggers a psychotic break, Cameron would still be classified as bipolar I, despite also having major depressive episodes. Just to stress, fluctuation between states is not consistent nor the same for everyone. A hypomanic stage could last for a few days, followed by one reverting to a more equilibrium state for some time before experiencing a depressive episode. Or a person could fluctuate between hypomania and depression right after the other. While a major depressive episode is classified as lasting longer than 2 weeks, some could last for months, even a year or more. However, there are those who have not experienced either a full-blown manic or major depressive episode, but still struggle with significant and frequent mood swings. These individuals will be classified as struggling with cyclothymic disorder, or cyclothymia, where fluctuations in one's mood is significant, but neither the ups or downs are extreme enough to be classified as bipolar I or II. Well, hey, that's not too bad then, right? Hell no. While cyclothymic disorder may sound less destructive, it is anything but. See, in the cases of say bipolar I and II, when a person experiences a full-blown manic or major depressive episode, the signs can be quite obvious and blatant. If someone who is quite social suddenly withdraws themselves for weeks on end, or if someone who is mostly even-keeled all of a sudden begins acting extremely out of character, those around them may be alerted to their change in behavior and speak to them about their shifting mood, helping them get any necessary aid. However, if these shifts are not all that extreme, they may not be as noticeable to the person experiencing them, nor to those around them. Yet that doesn't mean they cannot be destructive. Even slight hypomanic or depressive episodes can result in detrimental effects to one's life. Perhaps you have a strict work deadline that is hindered by a depressive episode, thus resulting in damage to your future job prospects or reputation. Or, say in a hypomanic state, you make an extravagant purchase that you now have to pay off over the course of several months, increasing your financial stress. These are not massive destructive episodes, but can slowly chip away at your stability and security, which can in turn lead to more overall stress, leading to one's mood becoming more and more dysregulated, leading to more severe episodes. While someone being diagnosed with cyclothymia is relatively rare compared to bipolar I and II, estimates show up to 50% of those with cyclothymia go on to be diagnosed with bipolar I or II. Thus, most likely, there are many out there who are suffering from cyclothymia, but simply don't realize it due to the ups and downs not being detrimental enough for them to take notice. That is, until they progress to becoming so. With say Pat, Carrie, and Cameron, their manic behavior is far more pronounced when we are first introduced to them. Thus, we as an audience may suspect they are struggling with some sort of mood disorder right from the get-go, based solely on their erratic behavior, but not so much with Craig. After his father's death, the audience may chalk his erratic behavior up to more of an acute trauma response, but then when he seems strangely elated after May states she is pregnant, this may raise some red flags, with us wondering why he is acting in such a manner. But it is so fleeting that the audience may not think much of it. However, by season 4, Craig's manic behavior has progressed to such a clear and blatant extent, it is evident something else is going on, which in turn makes one look back and recognize early warning signs. Same goes with Lexi. When we are first introduced to her, we have no idea she is suffering from a disorder. The audience just assumes she is a joyous, optimistic person. Her up stage doesn't raise any red flags or result in any dangerous or debilitating behavior, as it does for the other characters. Thus, to outside eyes, Lexi appears to have everything together. Because their symptomatology doesn't seem all that extreme, we may not take notice to the fluctuations in their mood until it progresses into a full-blown manic or depressive episode. But by that point, even if this causes those around them to take notice, it may have already resulted in devastating effects to their life. Now, in the previous episode, this is where I discussed how the disorder is treated before following up with how dangerous misdiagnosis can be. But in the particular case of bipolar disorder, I really cannot discuss them separately given the sheer obfuscating manner in which the disorder presents itself. As I stated in the previous episode, ADHD can often be confused with the symptomatology of other disorders, such as generalized anxiety disorder or depression, as was the situation in my case. But bipolar bipolar disorder is a whole other animal. Due to the varying intensity and cycling of different mood states, it can be incredibly difficult to properly diagnose one's condition. Bipolar disorder can often be misdiagnosed as or confused with anxiety disorders, other general mood disorders, schizophrenia, and sure enough, even ADHD. Ironically enough, when I first saw Silver Linings Playbook, given Pat's bipolar diagnosis, I assumed fellow character Tiffany was also bipolar due to her similar erratic behavior, but she actually has borderline personality disorder, a condition that is frequently mistaken as bipolar disorder. As much of a confusing mess as getting a proper diagnosis can be, this is further complicated by the fact, in the specific case of bipolar disorder, that certain treatments can actually exacerbate one's symptomatology. With Lexi, since her hypomanic phases don't result in any sort of negative effects on her life, one may confuse her hypomanic state with her base state. Thus, depending on the rate of her lapses, even a trained medical professional may mistakenly diagnose Lexi with major depressive disorder and prescribe her antidepressants, which have been shown to exacerbate the intensity of hypomanic phases, possibly resulting in pushing them into full-blown mania. This is why those with bipolar disorder who aren't prescribed antidepressants will have them paired with a mood stabilizer or antipsychotic to avoid this. If you look at the characters we have discussed thus far, you can see the variance in how the disorder manifests itself. Craig seems to have very fleeting manic episodes with no evident depression. Pat and Carrie seem to be in a more consistent and heightened hypomanic state, which can easily be pushed into full-blown mania. Cameron also seems to be in a more consistent hypomanic state, but also has bouts of major depression, and Lexi's hypomanic episodes don't seem all that severe, but alternate with extreme bouts of depression. Then there are the various ways those with cyclothymic disorder can manifest their symptoms. There are even cases where those with the disorder can display mixed features, demonstrating both manic and depressive symptomatology simultaneously. Or the fourth type, which is simply known as unspecified bipolar disorder, where a patient doesn't seem to fall in the other three categories, but still struggles with fluctuations in mood. And that isn't even touching how the use of alcohol, recreational drugs, or prescription medication can complicate the process of getting a proper diagnosis. Treatment of bipolar disorder is as varied as the expression of the disorder itself. Antidepressants, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, benzodiazepines, etc. Talk therapy can also be helpful to reduce stress and help avoid certain triggers. Although, to add to the frustration, sometimes episodes can occur completely at random with no apparent triggering event. With that in mind, I just want to bring light to the fact, and this goes the same for the episode on ADHD, that, I was going to try and put this in a more astute fashion, but just how much of a fucking pain in the fucking ass this entire process can be. Even if someone is able to recognize they are struggling with some sort of mental health issue, even if they do everything correct and seek help, that is simply the first step on a long, arduous, exhausting journey to attain an accurate diagnosis, a proper treatment plan, and manageable equilibrium in one's life. And that is aside from any complications that may arise in the meantime. What if you decide to switch jobs and there is a gap in your insurance coverage, or you are forced to switch providers? What if your condition results in you losing your job, which makes it even more difficult to keep your treatment consistent? Unfortunately, there is no maybe when it comes to this. There will be roadblocks, there will be setbacks. But if you are someone who is struggling, be assured as long as you are taking proactive action to address what you were going through, you are on the right path, and you sure as shit are not alone. All in all, I am happy to say that the portrayal of bipolar disorder in the media is for the most part quite accurate and respectful of what those who have the condition go through. But as I said, the examples I discussed have received their share of criticism. In the case of Carrie, while her portrayal has been widely praised for its accuracy, as the series has progressed, many have criticized the show for using her disorder to create manufactured conflict, treating it as more of a plot device, something I can definitely see as being problematic. In the case of Pat, some have expressed concern that it may perpetuate the misconception that those with bipolar disorder, or any mood disorder for that matter, are far more prone to inflicting violence on others, which is conflicted by the fact that the vast majority of those with said disorders are never involved in any sort of violent incident, and those that are often do so in conjunction with drug or alcohol use, which in and of itself increases the risk of violent behavior regardless of having any sort of psychiatric disorder, and is often as a result of those with the disorder struggling to cope with their symptoms. It is extremely important to dispel the stigma against those with bipolar disorder that they should be feared, as opposed to ensuring they are given and have access to the assistance they need. It is estimated that between a quarter and half of all of those who are diagnosed as bipolar will attempt to take their life at least once, which is 10 to 30 times higher than the average population, making it one of the most prevalent disorders associated with suicide. And that isn't even including those who may be struggling silently with an undiagnosed disorder. But despite these concerns, overall I was very pleased to see that bipolar disorder is by and large treated with nuance and accuracy, not simply played for laughs, and while it demonstrates the extremities of what the disorder can lead to, it primarily does so with empathy towards those inflicted, as opposed to just using their turmoil to stir up dramatic conflict. Unfortunately, I cannot say the same about the next disorder we will be discussing, schizophrenia, which is perhaps one of the most egregiously misrepresented and insultingly sensationalized psychiatric disorders featured in media. We will mostly discuss more accurate portrayals of the disorder, but yeah, buckle up because we have a lot of shit to dispel. Thank you very much for tuning in to this episode of Media Misdiagnosis. Make sure to share the video if you found it valuable, and consider supporting me on Patreon if you'd like to see more of my content. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.